Now, back to Access Tech Live.
And we're back on Access Tech Live. Now, later today, in fact, right after this program, Microsoft and Cephable will be holding a joint webinar entitled Understanding AI and the NPU. So, first off, who or what is Cephable and what are they doing to advance accessibility? Well, joining us now is the CEO of Cephable, Alexander Dunn. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Alex, I'm excited to have you on. Before we even dive into the details of the webinar, which I think is super interesting, can you share, your personal story behind the creation of Cephable and how it inspired you to develop this technology?
Yeah, so I guess quick sort of context, Cephable is a software platform focused on empowering people with alternative inputs out of the box, things like adaptive voice controls, face expressions, head gestures, virtual buttons, multimodal controls, things like that. My background's in applied machine learning, and I've got a younger brother with a disability. He's 15 years younger than me. Basically, right at the start of the pandemic, I went home to visit my family and was watching him basically try to keep up with some of his friends playing Minecraft and having a hard time with physical inputs on things like a keyboard or a mouse or a game controller. And so through the pandemic, I started streaming on Twitch, exploring alternative ways to use speech. I was doing a lot of work in speech recognition, trying to basically navigate new forms of speech recognition to turn them into controls, first for gaming, and then very quickly after that into really all sort of forms of digital controls for schoolwork, for productivity at home, for media controls, and everything in between.
I mean, it's incredible the work you're doing. And of course, you're doing this webinar today, just after this program, in fact, called Understanding AI and the NPU. Now, there's a lot of acronyms in there, so I'd like to break this down a little bit. Of course, we know what AI is. We know that's artificial intelligence. NPU, what are we talking about there? What does that mean?
Yeah, so the NPU is a newer addition to the compute world, just like a CPU or a central processing unit. An NPU stands for neural processing unit. It's essentially a silicon chip built into newer laptops that's designed specifically for machine learning tasks and AI workloads. And so what we do with leaning on the NPU is we run a lot of our inferencing machine learning models directly on this new chip, where we get faster performance for things like faster speech recognition, faster face and head movement tracking, but also moving Cephable controls in that inferencing to an NPU means that our software doesn't have to add extra cost in terms of compute resources or needs to the rest of your computing, meaning that you can play games without having to change your graphic settings while using camera controls with Cephable, and you can have more apps open, do more things. But it also means that us as Cephable, as developers of software, we can create new types of interactions that are designed specifically for the NPU, because we're sort of unlocking next level machine learning processing that we can do without having to go to the cloud and do all these expensive things that otherwise are timely, require an internet connection, and really in the end are just expensive to run. We can run it all offline on your own device and really personalize it there too.
Prior to this, this generation of AI and NPUs, how were you doing it before, and how has this opened the door to new experiences for not only what you're doing, but also the future of what you're doing?
Yeah, so there's sort of two sides to what we do with machine learning and AI at Cephable. We do what's called inferencing machine learning. That's where we run like speech recognition, computer vision modeling to track your face, your eyes, things like that. And then we also do generative AI to be able to allow an individual to basically create and personalize their set of controls by just describing it. So saying things like, I need to use PowerPoint, and when I turn my head to the right, it should go to the next slide, and then I need voice controls for all these shortcuts. What we do now on devices that don't have an NPU is we run the inferencing side, so the speech recognition, the computer vision, the face tracking, on your CPU or your GPU if you have it. And it's fine and it works, great. But it also means that we're consuming those resources, which means that there's some compromise that has to be made. If you are playing a game, you got to turn down the graphic settings, like I said. Or if you are trying to do a whole lot of other things, you might have to close certain apps or more browser tabs just in order to make room for your assistive technology. And that's not just unique to Cephable. That's sort of true for just about every single alternative input. And then what we do for the generative AI is right now we do run it on the cloud. We use Microsoft Azure. We have our fine-tuned generative AI models that we run. And it also means that that data has to go back and forth. It requires that you have an internet connection in order to do that control generation. But what we're doing on NPUs now is starting to bring that generative capability entirely offline. So you don't have to be connected to the internet. Your data never leaves your computer. and you're doing all that personalization and like custom generation entirely on device. But it also means we can do some new cooler things that we're researching, like being able to basically just tell your computer what you want it to do and have it actually contextually understand what's happening on your screen and then figure out how to navigate those applications and do things for you. Those are the types of things that we can't really do in a cloud environment, mostly because it's too slow and too expensive. And our software is free for individuals, so we don't want to have to like create any sort of like extra cost in order to add these new types of experiences.
But of course, it's so much more than that, isn't it? Because I mean, there's a huge debate right now and a huge conversation around AI and accessibility, how they both fuse together, and how AI can aid in the demand for better accessibility, better website access, better app access for more people. But the great thing about this, and the way I think about this is, before we would get software that we would use to, for example, make the web more accessible to me, for example, as a blind person, right? But now it seems to me, with all of this capability of machine learning, that the machine learns from me as well, which means I can personalize and I can actually feed into that system now and say, actually, that was great that you did it this way, but ultimately, could you do it this way because that would be quicker? Am I right in saying that? Is that ultimately the benefit here? It's almost a two-way street.
That's exactly right. I also think that specifically when it comes to new AI PCs, it's that level of personalization like you're talking about, but without having to give that data up anywhere. You don't have to give your data to OpenAI or to Microsoft or to Google or to Apple. It can really, truly stay offline on your device where you have full ownership over it. I think that's the most exciting thing for me, because like AI and accessibility, there's such a direct correlation. There's so many cool things happening in the market right now. There's new startups coming up with great ideas. Obviously, we're trying to be one of those, building awesome assistive technology focused around applications of AI and machine learning. But it's exciting to see that the hardware all the way down to the silicon is advancing around this too, because it's affording us the ability to create more accessible experiences or to create better assistive technology that we just simply couldn't do before.
Alex, how does your mission align with obviously what they're doing at Microsoft, and also how did that relationship come to be?
Yeah, so we've been working with Microsoft closely for a while. On a personal level, I've been a Microsoft MVP for I think it's 9 years now. It's what all these like plaques are behind me. So I've worked with the Azure team, the .NET teams, and the research group focused on assistive technology, like Bryce Johnson, one of the creators of the Xbox Adaptive Controller, along with all the sorts of really cool kits that they have. So the way that we work with them is we try to be supplementary and additive to the work that they're already doing to make the operating system and their own apps more accessible. And so we can lean into those things and then bring another level of personalization across devices too. So that sort of came to be with, actually, I first got introduced to Bryce because in my research, I was participating in a Microsoft hackathon, and someone saw it and just immediately sent it to Bryce, and we started chatting. And so since then, we've worked really closely with the Surface team, who was originally introduced to us by Bryce, the accessibility teams, obviously, and the Microsoft Teams team, the Office teams, and so much more.
It's great we talk about things like gaming and we talk about the personalization and all of that, but there is another side to this, which is employment. And the number of disabled people who are out of work, who want to be in work, by the way. It's not that we all just don't want to be working. Mm-hmm. We do want to work, but there are many challenges in our way. And AI could assist with that, right? So, what you're doing could also enable people to get into the workplace. And by what you're doing, also show the capability of what disabled people can do in the workplace.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We actually just published a white paper and a video with Intel and Accenture just this past Monday, actually exploring the value of AI-powered alternative controls in the workplace and what it means for accessibility, equity, and inclusion, and things like virtual meetings, jumping on Zoom and Teams and being able to participate in a way that works best for you, being productive and being comfortable through the different types of workload as well. And what we found is that a vast majority, I think the exact number is 86% of people that we did this study with, found that these alternative controls made them significantly more comfortable throughout the day. They were able to save money on other assistive technologies that they otherwise had to procure themselves because their employer might not actually be able to procure it for them. And when it comes to workforce readiness, before you're even in a job that might have an accommodation suite of tools, there's so many barriers in place to be able to like actually prove that you're in a position to do the job at the same level or same pace as someone else. And a lot of times that's what we call a disability tax. It's why do I as an individual have to pay so much money in order to use my computer the same way other folks are? And or why do I have to spend so much time configuring everything all the time in order to be able to, again, use these new types of inputs? And that's, I think, where the value of AI really comes into play, because it's not just creating these new experiences, it's also in the ways that we use it, for example, taking away that burden of configuration and all these settings and things you always have to be managing that are always top of mind. And instead, just being able to ask your AI to complete the thing for you or to help you along the way in order to get tasks done while maintaining your comfort, your personal level of control, and still your thinking and doing across those different actions.
I love how we're finally getting to see some real practical and substantive uses of AI that are just beyond the fanfare that popped out a couple of years ago with just being able to understand to speak. It's really cool to see that. This webinar that you're doing today with Microsoft, it's called Understanding AI and the NPU. What can people learn from it? Because it is a free webinar, and we'll give out the address in a couple of minutes here. But what are you going to be talking about specifically?
Really diving a bit deeper into the stuff that we just talked about. It's helping people really understand the value of an NPU from an accessibility and assistive technology perspective, but also outside of that and the future types of AI interactions that we're starting to see come to life that are possible now because of these devices, as well as just diving more into why it matters to have them, why use an NPU over a CPU or GPU. So we go a little bit more into the technical details. We talk about the availability of these new devices, and we talk about all the different ways that people are already applying them. But how we're sort of future looking into what these types of new categories of devices can unlock, both for developers like ourselves at Cephable, but also for every individual who's using it. Like, what are the new things you'll really be able to do with any AI PC? So we get it all into the weeds in just about 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and on the technical side, on the real user experience side, on the corporate business side as well, like why enterprises should be thinking about rolling these out for team members and employees, both from the space of accessibility and accommodation, but also just purely from productivity and sort of everything in between.
There's two tracks here, right? This is how I feel about it. And I don't want to be negative Nancy over here, right? But I have to be honest. There are lots of people who say, AI is not performing brilliantly at the moment. There's so much junk out there. It's being fed back into the system, generated by AI, that is actually confusing the system and bringing up a lot of junk. Does that concern you at all when you think about what you're trying to do, or do you see that as an entirely separate thing?
Oh, it always concerns me. In the world of machine learning engineering, we have a saying that goes garbage in, garbage out. And it's really just how machine learning models work. The more bad stuff you give it, the more bad stuff you get out of it. And we've seen that in the world of just really wild, ridiculous things that have come out of especially some generative AI models. My favorite example from our side when we were working on a new model, a new fine-tuned version of an existing model, which I won't name in order to not throw any disgrace on it, because it is an incredible platform, where we were trying to generate controls. It's basically our baseline test for, can I create controls for Microsoft Word? And it started to do that. And then it started to output a debate about the ethics of lying. And I was like, that has nothing to do with what we're trying to do. So that is one of those, why understanding how to apply machine learning and core principles of ethics in AI and ethics in machine learning, defeating biases in your data, and really everything in between is super important. But the pace at which I would say non-traditional machine learning engineering is now using and adapting AI without understanding best practices definitely creates some dangerous things. And it also makes it hard for consumers to navigate what is really good for me and what's going to work for me. Our approach is the world of accessibility is it's got to be data that's inclusive of everyone.
Yeah, I think that's something we deal with every day now: is what's real, what's true, what's not. Final question for you before I let you go is that do you think we're going to be in a place where we can manage that safely and ethically?
I think so. I think that there are enough folks really focused on the true high quality applications of AI. There's enough focus on third-party regulation around how we go about doing it and building trust systems, all the way from things like TruePick, which is a platform that's helping understand the tracing of generative AI capabilities and building a trust center around it, so that if I see an AI-generated image, wherever it was generated is saying, hey, I generated this, and being able to have honest generated images, videos, audio, be able to say like, no, this is real, it was unaltered. Those types of things are starting to surface up into the consumer market to be able to sort of build on that trust and understanding of like, is this real or is it not? And so I think that the more that we build tools and we build processes around it, which is such a heavy focus in this community, we'll see it come around. I mean, it's the same thing that happens with any technology that comes out. I even compare it a lot of times to things like the App Store, where the App Store came out and it opened up to developers, and all of a sudden there was a whole bunch of just ridiculous apps that were useless. And it took a lot of people coming together to build high quality stuff that really then stood out against all the noise. I think we're starting to see that come to life too when it comes to applying AI.
That's a great example. Alex, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Of course, anybody watching who wants to join the webinar, it is free. Go to cephable.com. That's CEPHABLE.com/webinar-AI-and-the-NPU. Coming up after a quick break, I went hands-on, or actually have hands-on with the new Z Fold 6 and the Z Flip 6 from Samsung. So let's find out all about them and show you right here on Access Tech Live. Stick around.
There's more Access Tech Live to come. Get involved and have your say at Access Tech Live on social media. We'll be right back.